Well, I've been threatening to do this for a while, and finally I decided to do it. I went off and I bought myself a drone. It's a nice little drone. It's a pretty good drone, actually. It's by a company called DJI, and it's a Mavic Air 2. It's not a professional drone, but it's one of the top end amateur drones that's on the market. It's got a nice camera in it, and it's supported by a nice suite of software. So this is a video that talks about my first flight. You'd think that flying a drone would be pretty simple. You take the drone out of the box, turn it on, take off. Turns out it's not quite that simple. The airspace in the United States is controlled by the FAA, and this also includes the control of the flying of drones. So in order to take care of all of that, the drone manufacturers have created software that runs in conjunction with your cell phone that determines when you can take off and when you can't take off. And according to where you are when you try to take off the drone, it'll tell you whether you're capable of flying or not. Now, the first place that I decided I was going to fly was down by my church on Shea Boulevard. And I got there and got everything set up, and I was all excited because it was going to be my first flight. And I found out that I couldn't fly there. It was in a restricted zone. I still haven't figured out why, but I didn't know enough about the system to be able to go into the software to request permission to fly, so I didn't. I moved farther south into an area that I thought would also be safe, and as it turns out, it wasn't. So my first attempt at flying the drone turned out to be a non-event. The next day I decided to try again, and this time I chose a spot that was far north of Scottsdale and in a place where I figured it would be relatively safe. And so I packed everything up and made sure that everything was charged and everything was set to go, and headed off to the new site that was up close to a place called Pinnacle Peak in North Scottsdale. And I finally was able to get the drone off the ground. So here's some of the video that I took during the first flight. I'm actually kind of surprised that I had the wherewithal to remember to turn the camera on to record. But it's nothing that's very thrilling, but I was just starting to learn how to use the drone and how to control it. I wanted to learn how to make it go forward and backward and up and down and side to side and rotate. So that's what this initial footage is. And as you can see, I was able to control it pretty well. I could make it do what I wanted it to do. The drone is controlled by the GPS system, and as it turns out, the one feature that I really like, there's a button on the controller that you can press at any time, and this button causes the drone to go up to a certain elevation, certain altitude, and to fly over the spot where it took off, and then to slowly descend and to land exactly within a couple of feet, actually within a couple of inches of the place where it took off. And so here I am just playing around with the drone. That's me standing by the car with the controller. I was in the shade so I could see the screen, and just putting it through its paces, making it go forward and backward and whatever. And so it's not the most exciting footage in the world, but it was an accomplishment for me because I was actually able to make the drone do what I wanted it to do. So it was good for me. I also included a couple of other shots here that show some of the other features of the drone. So here's a couple of additional shots that I took. I sped the footage up a little bit because it kind of dragged on for a while. But like I say, I was really just playing. Here's that landing feature I was talking about. That drone landed within 6 inches of where it took off from. Just amazes me. but it's a nice feature. You can, if you lose track of the drone, you can't find it, you don't know where it is, you can make it come home just by pressing a button, and it will come right back to where it took off from. So, the funny thing, part of the rules and regulations of flying a drone say that you have to be able to have a visual line of sight to the drone all while you're flying it. And I'll be honest with you, that at the farthest point, that drone was probably 100 feet in the air and a couple of 100 feet away from me, and I couldn't see it. So I doubt that people are able to actually keep a visual sight of their drone while they're flying it, because the drone has a range of over a mile in distance, and the altitude, there's no altitude restriction, although in the United States you're limited to flying at 400 feet. Here's a feature that's built into the drone that's really nice. It's called a droney effect, and you press one button and it will back away from the subject while keeping the subject in the middle of the frame. Here's some bonus footage that I was able to take on the second day. It turns out that the apartment complex that I live in is right in the middle of that restricted zone that I showed in an earlier map, very close to the Scottsdale airport. And as a result, I was pretty certain I was never going to be able to record anything in the neighborhood. It turns out I spent some time today and I figured out how to use the software to request clearance from the FAA and the tower at the airport to be able to fly my drone in my neighborhood. And I was able to get clearance and I was able to make a flight. So this footage is some footage that I took this afternoon around the apartment complex that I live in. I've sped this footage up a little bit because it was kind of slow and draggy. But here's a good view of the apartment building that I lived in before I moved into the place I'm in now. The place I refer to as the House of Wrinkles. It's Atria. And as you can see, it's right across the street from where I'm living now. So all in all, I considered this to be a successful day. I figured out how to unlock the code so I was able to fly my drone in restricted space. Well, that's my video. I hope you liked it. Stay healthy. Remember, wash those hands.